Welcome to the NREM podcast, where we discuss the law for real estate investors. Andy and Sean are both attorneys. Nothing said in this discussion should be considered legal advice. We're simply providing information and education. You should consult with an attorney in your state regarding any specific legal issue that you may have. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, our topic is strategies for residential property management. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like our channel. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. Our preferred method of bringing this to you is YouTube, so subscribe and like that channel. We welcome your feedback and your participation. With that, we're going to go to Sean, who's going to give us our legal update.
Yeah, so today I want to talk about a topic that I don't think is discussed very often, but is important, which is the proper documentation for dispositions of properties that were acquired subject to existing financing. So what I mean by that is there are times where you acquire property by subject to financing that you decide, instead of, renting the property, I'm going to go and actually do a disposition. I'm going to sell it to somebody else on creative financing or using creative financing. I'm going to be the lender, and I'm going to basically do some portion of seller carryback, and I'm going to convey it to a buyer. In that case, your documents need to look a little different than how you acquired it. And when you acquire property by creative financing, you're basically having all of these disclosures for the seller to sign, basically saying, hey, the loans are going to remain, there's going to be, due on sale, those types of things. In that case, you're basically telling the seller, hey, look, seller, this is the nature of the transaction. The loans will remain. There's due on sale. There's other, potential consequences here. And you're giving all of these disclosures that you should be giving to the seller to properly protect yourself, to document the transaction, to avoid, future claims, that type of thing. Well, what about when you go to sell it and the buyer is purchasing it, and there's these loans that are out there that the buyer's not the borrower on? You as the seller aren't the borrower on. In fact, the original seller is the borrower on those loans. So the buyer needs to understand and, appreciate basically the nature of the transaction, and the fact that, hey, look, if the original lenders, the existing lenders who the original seller is the borrower with, if they decide to invoke the due on sale clause, or if you don't make payments to that lender, that you could face foreclosure of this property. The property could be lost in that event, or something's going to happen to satisfy the lender requirements if they invoke the due on sale clause. So you have to have new or additional disclosures to the buyer in that transaction, letting the buyer know that, hey, this is the nature of the transaction, et cetera. So something to think about going forward as far as dispositions is you can't use the same documents for a disposition as you can an acquisition of a subject to transaction. You have to have different disclosures, different documents. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right. Thank you for the legal update, Sean. With that, we're going to get into our topic today. But before we get into the specifics, we want to make note for the audience that we are adding an additional segment to the show, which is that we are taking questions from you. And you can do it live on the fly, but you don't have to wait for that. We'll be doing it at the final 15 minutes of the show, but there's ways to post comments ahead of time. So with that, I'm going to let Mayu tell you how to go about that and how that's going to work.
Yeah, so as Andy said, we're going to be taking questions at the end of the show. So anything regarding today's topic, obviously we can only get to a a small amount of questions at a time. So as soon as you have a question, put it in the chat. We are monitoring the chat. So as soon as you get those in, the sooner we'll be able to get to them.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you don't have to wait till the question segment. Start posting your comments now, and we'll do what we can to get to them. With that, today we're talking about strategies for residential property management. And with us, we have Oggie Penev. Oggie, how are you?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. So, Augie, it's kind of funny. We were just joking about this before the show, but you do a lot of stuff in the real estate sphere. So let's kind of take this one by one. You're a broker, right?
Real estate broker. Got my license 17 years ago.
So tell us, you're also an owner of ProX Realty LLC. Tell us about that.
Yeah, ProX Realty Management specifically only manages real estate properties for investors. We don't do very many sales. We don't compete with agents. We main focus is servicing investors.
Now, I know on the kind of the marketing and development side, if folks have watched us before, you're probably a familiar face because we meet up with you at the Buy and Hold meetup. Why don't you tell our listeners about that, what you do with regard to the Buy and Hold meetup?
Yeah, this is part of the education and consulting investors on how to buy and invest in rental properties, buy and hold properties. So we started that probably a year and a half ago. Every month at the end of the month on every last Tuesday of the month, we do a meetup. We invite professionals to talk about anything that they can educate us as investors when we're buying and holding properties. We don't sell anything at the event. It's food, drinks, networking. It's pretty fun, and you guys come all the time and share a lot of good information. So
Yeah, we enjoy being a part of the Buy and Hold meetup. You know what I really love about it is not only do you learn a lot of great stuff, but you realize when you get involved with the real estate community, how important it is to start, meeting people in the industry, regardless of whether it's real estate investing or hard money lending or lawyers or just other folks doing the same thing you're doing, just finding out because they're a pretty generous community. So just finding out who's there, and it's a great opportunity to be there for that. Now, I know you're planning on offering some additional buy and hold training, or looking to offer more training on buy and hold. What does that look like?
so the buy and hold grew up into a little more sophisticated consulting company, and now we are calling it the Buy and Hold Academy. And Sean is, and you guys are very involved in creating all the legal stuff around helping investors buy and hold properties. So the whole idea is, in order to take full advantage of and full return ROI on investing in buy and hold properties, it's not enough to know the real estate. If you know the real estate, that's okay, but you're not getting full return. You have to know taxes, you have to know financing, and you have to know the legal side of the business. So these are four separate things in the buy and hold business. And we teach investors how to look on the investing as a business, one big entity. The problem comes when you go to all these different professionals, like you go to the attorney, you go to the tax guy, you go to the mortgage guy, you go to your agent if you're not doing it yourself. And all these people, they do not talk between each other. They all individually give you really good advice, but sometimes the advice that they give you stops you from growing. When the attorney creates a structure that doesn't allow the tax guy to be flexible, and when the tax guy creates a structure that hides too much income and the mortgage guy cannot get qualified for mortgage, then these things do not work together. So our job is to find the fine balance between all these professionals and set up the right structure for you so you can grow and buy unlimited properties.
So today we're talking about property management. So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a background of you and your experience in property management, how you got started in that, and what that looks like.
It's very basic. I bought properties and I needed to manage these properties. So I created property management company so I can manage my properties and at the same time help other investors do it. So the good part is that everything I set up as a structure and service for the property management, it's the way my property is treated, that's how the client's properties are treated. It's all the same.
So I remember when I was not just freshly out of law school as a young attorney doing some real estate work, and I started to do a good bit of landlord tenant law. And one of the things I learned as an attorney was how frightening managing a property could potentially be. Now, as an attorney, full disclosure here, we only see the really bad stuff, right?
You do.
All the good stuff never gets sent to us.
Yeah.
So we just only see the bad. So I spent years only seeing the bad, and I thought, holy cow, I am never going to own investment property unless I can have somebody else deal with this, or unless I can do something else. So the idea back then of having a property manager felt just totally normal. Why don't you give our listeners, let's really start at the beginning here. What is it that a residential property manager typically does for a residential homeowner who's looking to rent their property?
Of course, everything depends on how the business is set up for the property manager, what they offer as a service. But generally, it's property management offers either full property management, which could be divided by short-term rentals or long-term rentals, and they charge a monthly management fee. Or the other service they could offer is just one-time fee to find a tenant, rent the property for you, and give it back to you to manage it yourself. But for us, property manager, the way we want it service is you come to me as a client and you give me absolutely everything with a high level of trust, and I do absolutely everything for you. You don't touch anything. The only time you hear from me is when we have to spend some money on repairs that exceed $250. Otherwise, we act as the owner practically. We in our property management agreement, we ask for a high level of trust from the investors. And when they give it to us, we have quite a bit of power to manage the properties without them even being involved. So we act as a buffer also for legal issues between the tenant and the landlord.
So do you like to offer kind of a scaled solution where the landlord who's looking to lease their property can take advantage of certain services, or do you just like to say, "Hey, look, if you want us, we're doing it all."
Yeah.
Or can you piecemeal that? How does that work?
No, you're not being efficient. So if you start changing for one investor, you do one thing. For different investor, do completely different thing. Menu service, you're not efficient. Which means either you have to be more expensive, you're not going to be able to profitable, which eventually the company is going to suffer, or you just not provide good service, efficiency and price. You have to charge more the client for that specific menu that you want to service them. So the best thing is just almost everybody it's their service the same way. That's the most efficient and the cheapest way to do it.
Hey, Augie, what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a property manager?
So first thing is you're giving away control. So you have to trust the property manager before you give him control. So disadvantage, that's the disadvantage, picking the wrong person. So you just have to know what to ask, who to pick, and maybe have a way out if the relationship doesn't work. Like, for example, for our clients, we ask for a high level of trust, but we also give them 30 days to fire us, 30 days notice. We don't have a long-term contract with our clients. The moment they don't like us, they can leave. So that's our promise. You give me, trust me, and if I mess up, you can leave at any time. I'm not gonna
Right.
punish you for that. Um, that's the negative. Positive is way, way more than the negative, of course, because the main reason you got into this, um, I mean, the main way you make money with buying whole properties is when you're buying properties, not managing properties. So, me or my company as a property manager will free your time to do what makes you the most money, which is buying properties, not worrying about how they're going to get tenant, how you're going to fix the toilet, all these little things that, no, you have to look at the big picture. You make money only when you buy properties. And when we take care of your properties, you have more free time to go and find deals. That's the biggest thing that I can help. And then starts all the legal issues, all the paperwork, taxes, things like that, cash flow. A lot of the landlords make almost the same mistakes. Like, for example, common mistake is they fell behind on raising the rent. Very
Mm,
common, very common thing. Um, market rent $1,500. The rent is $900.
mm,
Yeah, and they say, oh, but they're good tenants. Yeah, but you're losing $700. You can pay me the management fee, and you're gonna still gonna have a lot of money left over for handling the property. Second thing, landlords get attached emotionally to their tenants, and they believe their sob stories. Oh, I'm going to pay you next week. Oh, I'm going to pay this Friday, or just wait a little bit more. And then
mm.
3 months later, you have no income, pay the mortgage, and you have to evict the person. So with us, no emotion. On the fifth day, get a notice for 5-day notice. On 22nd day, get a court date. On the 25th day, you get judgment, and then you get out of the property.
So you guys handle all of that.
Yeah, everything. So
You're the buffer. You're the buffer.
yes, you don't touch anything. So
Oh.
with us, even we guarantee the tenants. So our landlords do not know who the tenant is. So the only thing when you are hiring me, you're telling me I want this property rented for this price. After I do a research and tell you, hey, we can get this. And you
Mhm,
say, okay, I agree on renting the property for this. If I find a tenant for that price, I automatically sign the lease for you on your behalf. You
mhm.
don't even know the tenant. I just tell you, we got a tenant. You're gonna start getting money on this day. Should be depositing the money.
You just get
And
money in the mailbox. Just
yes,
comes.
and I guarantee the tenant. Since
Ah, okay.
since I picked the tenant for you, if the tenant stopped making the payments, I pay for the eviction.
Mm.
I
Wow,
guarantee the tenant. Yes.
that's
So
cool.
high trust, high penalty. So if I don't do my job well, I'm gonna suffer big time. I don't want to pay for these evictions.
Right.
So
So let me ask, and I know that we can't ever say, well, there's an industry standard, there's a set property management fee, that type of thing. But typically out there, what's the range of property management fees that you see out there in the industry being charged to owners?
yeah, so let's kind of change it a little bit so people understand how the fees are created.
Okay.
We as a property management companies, all the property management companies, we have absolutely the same expenses. So the question is, how do you get your money? So if there's two ways: property management fee
Mm-hmm.
officially, leasing fee when you rent the property,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
junk fees that make up the difference um, for your profit. So when you offer lower management fee or flat low fee per month, you still have your expenses for the company. So you
Mhm.
have to make up that expenses from somewhere. So you charge the landlord junk fees.
Mm.
So, for example, um, somebody comes and says $65 flat fee per month. No company can survive on $65 flat fee per month. If they do, they're hiring very low quality people overseas to run very important part of the business that eventually is going to suffer.
Mm.
So how they make the money? For example, 10% on top of every repair that happens to the
Oh,
property,
interesting.
you
Yeah.
get percentage of that. I don't personally don't like that, because practically you're giving incentive for for your property manager to find things wrong in the property so they can make extra money. So I from the beginning I set up the service for me to like I'm the the client. So I don't
Mhm.
like that. I don't want to be taken advantage. So we decided to two simple fees. Um, One is monthly fee per month, management fee from collected rent, which means no tenant, no money, we don't get paid. We charge 8% from the collected rent. And when we have a vacant property and we have to place a tenant for professional pictures, paying commissions, MLS, all that's expenses, we charge half of the first month rent to cover this cost.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we don't have anything else. Like we don't have a startup fee, we don't have an admin fee, we don't have tax creation fee, because every new landlord we take on board, we have to create TTP license to
Mhm.
collect sales taxes and pay the county. So this
Mhm.
involves money and time and things. Some companies charge fee for to set up this for you, but of course, if they charge low monthly fee, they're gonna have to make it up on the back end somehow. There's no other way. We all have the same running expenses as a company. If you're low budget, your employees are low budget, and you are low budget. So practically get what you can.
Right.
If you're not receiving a fee because no rent's being taken in, and you're also guaranteeing by covering evictions with tenants that you brought in, I imagine your process for bringing in tenants has a lot of due diligence to it. Is there explain to us that kind of process and finding tenants and what you do to evaluate whether they're gonna be a good tenant.
Yeah, I mean, we do a standard background check, employment check, verification. And it's just we do everything. We don't miss anything on the checklist. And usually, after you've done so many, you just get the gut feeling who is right, who is wrong. Of course, we make mistakes sometimes, but we try never to go um, to court or eviction to go. We negotiate with the tenant. If we see something's coming, say, hey, let's settle. Why don't you move this weekend? We're not going to proceed. Just get out. No eviction, shake hands. Let's get it done.
Yeah. Well, so much of this too, money in every business has a lot to do, and how much you lose or make has a lot to do with time. And when I did a lot of residential landlord tenant work, so much, and I think you mentioned this, so many mistakes happen in not realizing that certain notices have to go out in order to trigger your rights, in order to evict or to do the next step. And in this discussion back and forth or trying to make it work, they don't send out these notices, 5-day notice to pay or quit if you're in Arizona, those kind of things. And it seems to me that a property manager adds a real value to that, that's something that, there's systems and procedures that you guys have in place that are on day whatever. If we don't have this, that notice is going out, so we have the ability to move forward. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of little things that landlord can lose money. For example, if you go into the property without proper notice, the fine is 1 month rent. Even if just going in the backyard without proper notice, the tenant can complain, go to court, and get fined 1 month rent. Returning deposits on time. If you don't return the deposit on time, according to law, the fine is 3 times the deposit.
Yeah, it can be steep.
Exactly. Every time you deny a tenant, you have to tell them why denying them in writing. So, and most landlord thinks that the law do not apply for them because they just private citizens, but that's not correct.
So talk to me about being in the property management. You've already kind of alluded to this, but you're going to enter into an agreement with that landlord, a property management agreement. From your experience as a property manager, and I'm sure your agreement has probably changed over time, what are really the most important aspects of that agreement? What are they is the landlord signing over to you? What's important for you in that agreement to make to be an effective property manager?
The more power I have, the faster I react, and the faster and the more money we make for the landlord. Again, here we come with the high level of trust, but this is just our company. We just do it that way. The other thing is we make sure the landlord understands upfront what exactly uh, what exactly we do for them, all the fees we collect, all the payments, everything that it's outlined in the property management agreement. Of course, it's a lot of legal um, verbiage, but there's certain things that they need to know: the fees, what they pay, and things like that.
It sounds like that it's at a pretty important provision within the property management agreement itself that gives you, because you're really going to be acting as their property management agent, that they give you essentially soup to nuts rights to act on their behalf
Y-
with
w-
regard to that tenant.
Yeah, we do cap when we have to spend their money. We want permission for certain things, but when it comes to the proper legal execution on the process or the paperwork, we don't ask them. We just do it because they might say something that it's against the fair housing rules that we don't want them to make that mistake. So we're a licensed brokerage and broker, so we do have fiduciary duties, same like you guys.
Sure.
Not as highest level like attorney. Usually, but we do have a fiduciary duty, so we have to protect our clients. The landlords. Our clients are the landlords. The tenants are not our clients. They're just we still owe them fairness and honest, to be honest, and things like that. But we have to look at the best interest of the landlord.
Hey, Augie, I have a question. So you have a property management agreement. Things are going well, but the owner decides, you know, I'm ready to be done with this property. I'm going to seek to sell it. And so they go to sell the property. Um, how does that work? Because you just mentioned we're a licensed real estate broker. Do they have to use you or any property management company to list and sell the house, or what do they do in that regard?
It's negotiable. Every time you
Okay.
sign your property management agreement, you have to look to see if the, the company put that as a condition that you have to pay them a commission. A lot of the times the property managers company do when the tenant decides to buy the property, then the property management company's owed commission. We don't do that. We just do it actually. We have a special. We're the other way around. So this is how it works with us. We call it a free property management program. So let's say, Sean, you have a property and you let me manage the property for you for 5 years. And after 5 years, you decide to sell it. If you let me sell the property for you, out of the commission we get, we're going to reimburse all the management fees we've charged you over the years. So this way, your property management service has been free for 5 years. So, but every company is different, so you do have to look in the documents you're signing in advance. See.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, that's a unique structure.
What about tenant complaints? So a big selling point, if I'm a investor who's bought a residential property and I'm trying to sell it, is I'm going to pay this fee. I'm just gonna get my rent check. And I'm gonna go, like you said before, I go spend my time buying and holding and doing all of that. How do you handle tenant complaints? Do the tenants even know who the landlord is, or are you
Oh, no, no. They don't know the owner, and we don't want them to know the owner. We don't want them to call the owner. Like, I just turned down a client just for that reason, potential. He had a few properties, but the tenants were calling him, and he wanted to deal with the tenants, and he had a complaint that previous property management company didn't answer the phone to the tenants and things like that. I was like, we don't take any orders over the phone, any problems with the property over the phone. And he's like, oh no, I'd like you to pick up the phone. I was like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. It's not in your favor. It's not good for you. So, and that's, we just turned down the business. The way we do it, if a tenant has a request for repair or something, everything is done online through the mobile app, through the website we have, and everything has a date stamp with explanations what happened and when. So if the landlord comes and say, "Hey, this wasn't done on time," we can go back and see the records when the tenant called us, what we did, how soon we sent a contractor to fix it, and all these things. Same things with most common things is that insurance companies don't pay. For example, water leaks. If it's found that the water leak has been going on for a long time, the insurance company can deny the claim. So we want to know at what time the tenant reported to us there's a leak, and if there's any leak before. And if the tenant says, "Oh, I called you on this day and told you," it's like, no, we don't do that because we have policy. If you haven't followed the policy, nothing in writing, and we can have the tenant pay for any potential problems like that.
now, do you set up that requirement for the tenant's obligation to report
Yes,
complaints or whatever in the
yes.
lease itself?
Oh yeah, our lease agreement is that we use the standard Arizona Department of Real Estate approved lease, plus another 8 pages of additional clauses to protect the landlords. And every year they change and they come more and more. So
What I like about that is that you ensure that everything's documented, right? That's so often a problem when it comes to complaints, and we'll talk about repairs here in a second, but
when you go to court, who wins? The guy with the most paperwork, the most records. So that's how we do it.
so, this is really just a similar issue to complaints, but an issue that's probably requires your interaction more with the landlord, and that's repairs. So how do you set it up with your landlords and in dealing with tenants that have repairs and getting that quickly done, but keeping the landlord informed? Because at the end of the day, they're gonna be
Yeah.
paying for
So
it, right?
everything up to $250, or unless it's an emergency. So if there's a running leak, I cannot get a hold of the landlord. It's going to cost $600 to stop. I just do it. I act on it, and I cannot do it. Otherwise, everything over 250, we go and ask for permission so they know what's going on. Um, so we don't charge on top of the repairs from outside contractors. So we don't want to do repairs for no reason. It's just extra work for us. We just don't do it. For small repairs the tenant calls for, we might not send someone. We just maybe combine him later. If it's something that it's not emergency, it could be done in a month or two. When we have few small things like that, then we send, and we try to send handyman. So the handyman is the cheapest way to handle most of the repairs. Um, but everything is based on experience too. You don't want to replace a whole roof when you don't have to, or AC when you don't have to. It's just basic investment ROI. That's one of the important things when you're looking for a property manager. Probably is first is to be experienced agent that has done sales and maybe in investing second, because a lot of property managers are failed agents. Maybe I just don't want to. But look for someone that intentionally went into property management to do better. Second level is somebody that has investing, fix and flips, properties. And the third level, it will be somebody that really owns rental properties too, because they can understand how an investor would think. Because with us is I have the unique ability to look at 360 degrees. I'm a landlord, I'm an investor, I'm a real estate broker at the same time. So I can see from all different angles and create systems and procedures that kind of make everybody happy and protect. And at the same time, you make a good return on your investment. So a lot of um, and when Sean asked about the property management fees, sometimes you get this company that charges very little and or significantly little than somebody else, and you get your rent on time, and then you get rent for 1, 2, 3 years, no problem. But then tenants move out, and when you go and see the property, then you look at like $10,000 in repairs because the property management company, all they did is just get the money and put it in your bank account without anything extra than that.
Hey, Augie, I have a question for you. You just mentioned moving out and creating all this damage, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sure that's happened with anybody. You guys try to avoid it and take steps to avoid it, but inevitably a tenant's going to move out, going to leave the property in disrepair. What do you guys do for the owner during that time period? What does that look like? Do you guys say, "Hey, look, we're going to find another tenant, owner, get in there, hire your own contractors, fix up this unit," or are you working with the owner saying, "Okay, look, we need to do this, this, and this to get it back in a rentable condition. Here's who we're going to use." How involved are you during that process when there's no tenant in there, it's vacant, but yet it needs repairs. The unit
Yeah,
needs
the
repairs.
service doesn't stop. We do
Okay.
everything for you, regardless, tenant in, tenant out. It's everything. We still do it. We usually try to go into property prior to the tenant moving out,
Mhm.
so we can kind of have a punch list what needs to be done. So when the tenant moves out, things can start next day. So we can reduce vacancy, and then we decide what needs to be done and what makes sense. If sometimes we're not going to spend the money if it's not going to raise the rent.
Mm.
Sometimes we'd rather have less rent per month versus spending the unnecessary money for the landlord. Example, you can get $1,500 in as is condition, but if you spend $10,000, then you can get $1,800. Okay, we can do it, but how many years is going to take to recoup these $10,000? So divide 10,000 by 12 months. You're going to spend years and years and years trying to get this. We'd rather have you have a little less rent it faster, get the 10,000 and go buy another property. That's the better outcome. So we look at a little bit different. And the way I look at it, from the different perspective: landlord, investor, property manager. So we give this choice to the landlord, of course, and that's how we do it. So um, it's we don't want to spend the money if we don't have to.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about short-term rentals? Do you do any property management for short-term rentals, or is it just long-term?
So short term, as far as Airbnb, VRBO, we don't do it because it's a completely different game.
Sure.
You need to have completely different setup, different employees, different structure, different contracts, for example. That's one of the most common problems landlords do. For example, they use long-term lease for short-term rental. So when they do that, then they create long-term tenancy, which means that if you rent your property for the weekend to a tenant and a tenant doesn't move out on Monday, you go there and try to get them out, you cannot because you signed a long-term lease with them. You have to go through eviction versus calling the cops and getting them out. So the shortest we do is we call it corporate rentals, which is minimum a month. They're still furnished, but we do it for a month minimum, month, 2, 3 months, 6 months. And we have a separate lease specifically for these type of rentals because it's a type of a short-term lease that doesn't create tenancy, long-term tenancy.
How do you plan, or what systems do you have to plan for renewals for your landlord clients, of renewals of tenant leases? How many months prior to the expiration are you typically looking
So
to
we
try to make
want
that
60
happen?
days the tenant to let us know if they're staying or going. We don't renew the lease until we do an inspection on the property. So we want to make sure if there are any damages, and if they are done by the tenant, then the tenant has to fix them prior to renewing the lease. That's one of the most biggest issues, not just for landlords, but for property management companies to do proper maintenance. And a lot of property managers, they get the rent on time. The tenant never calls, but the property gets bad, worse and worse every, and then you get 3-4 years later, you get a property that needs tons of repairs. Rule of thumb is 1 month rent for the year has to go into maintenance. If you don't do any maintenance for 5 years, you're gonna have 5 rents, equal amount of repairs into the property.
So you just budget that in right at the beginning. So if for some reason you've gone a year or two and nobody's spent anything else, you're like, look, this is a problem, because even in the perfect world where we've got great tenants that like to take care of the property, there's this thing called wear and tear, and it
Yeah.
inevitably is going to happen.
Yeah, because then you separate the properties on A, B, and C properties. And if you manage C properties, sometimes we turn down properties because we don't have the setup to for so much intense repairs and hand holding to that type of a property. That it's very old, very deferred maintenance. Almost we call them slumlords, where it can things like that. So we try to avoid. We cannot. We don't want to manage properties like that.
Yeah, I really like the idea of being or thinking ahead in terms of the maintenance of the property. I have represented clients where it was just that scenario. You had somebody who was paying rent and was what you would have thought was a great tenant, and as long as, just like with mortgage companies, as long as the rent's being paid or the mortgage is being paid, nobody asks any questions. Then 5 years down the road, they move on and they get in there and it's 10 plus $1,000 and,
Yeah.
massive repairs because of
Yeah,
whatever.
we do 2 inspections per year. So the first inspection we do on the 3rd month when we place a tenant. We want to make sure we pick the right tenant. If we made a mistake, we want to know as soon as possible. And then we do another inspection on a lease renewal. So we know, keep the property updated anytime.
So that comes out to basically 2 a year?
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, here's the fine balance between harassment and inspection, because the tenants, you cannot do too many inspections. You just have to let the tenant live peacefully in the property.
So after the first year, does it typically just become at renewal time?
No, I mean, there's always things that come along that you have to manage if you see the property. We have programs that we change the air filters in the property, so we go once in a while to see what's going on. Our vendors are trained to look for things. Also, not to talk to the tenants. One big thing: vendors should not talk to tenants. If you're a landlord and you hiring someone, instruct your tenants, vendors, not to talk to the tenants any information at all.
And the idea there obviously is that the tenant is going to naturally perceive those people as, even if they're third parties that
Yeah,
you've
they
hired,
can,
as
they can
kind of
call you and say,
agents.
"Oh, the AC guy says that air conditioner has to be replaced." or something was leaking, or something needs to be repaired. Oh, they could be mold. It could be things like that. Stupid things that have no, um, it's not true, and just get in trouble. So.
So I would imagine as a property manager, mistakes are what drive a lot of landlords into your arms in the sense where they tried to do it on their own. They made a bunch of mistakes or they realized it was too much for them and we need to talk to a property manager. What are, and you've talked about some of them, what are the biggest mistakes that you've seen or the most common mistakes you see landlords make and why they really ought to be considering property
So
managers?
first is, like I mentioned, falling behind on raising the rents. You're not doing a favor to yourself or to your tenant also, because at some point, if you ask this tenant to leave, they gotta have to go rent somewhere. It's gonna be even worse for them to get another place, because the from what they were paying to what the market is, it's a huge shock for them, and they're not financially prepared for that. What I advise is 50% rule. That's how I call it. Let's say your rent is you're behind on rent, and it's $1,000 a month, and market rent is 1,500. When you go to the tenant to renew and say, "Hey, it's 1,500, you at 1,000. I'm not gonna go to 15, but I'm gonna go 50% of that. I'm gonna go to 1,250." Because it's a single math and return on investment. If you get the tenant out, you're gonna have a 1 month vacancy, which is $1,500, probably divided by 12. That's around $200. So you're gonna lose that anyway. If you're gonna kick the tenant out and get 100% and keep the tenant, get 50% increase, it's exactly the same money at the end of the year. But if you get the tenant out, then you have to do repairs, more expensive, things like that. So little things like landlords do not collect sales tax, and when you own more than a certain amount of properties, depending on the city, you're required to collect sales tax and report it to the county. So you're breaking the law. A lot of landlords do not follow the fair housing rules, even though they're supposed to. And the rule is you're self managing, but if you're using federal resources to manage your rent to manage your property, you have to follow fair housing rules, which means if you list your property for rent on Zillow, Zillow is very regulated, then you have to follow fair housing. Maybe if you have your rental property and you don't advertise on anything and just say word to mouth to your friends that you renting it something, maybe then you can not follow the fair housing, but it's very hard.
Well, and
Uh,
Augie, just to kind of jump in on that, what you're saying about fair housing, if you remember, maybe 5 years ago now, Facebook and a bunch of other companies were sued for fair housing violations because individual either agents or even owners would choose different categories within Facebook of who to show their stuff to, and then categories of who they didn't want to see it.
Yep.
So if it's like, well, I don't want anyone in a wheelchair to see this post. Well, now you have a clear fair housing violation, right? So how you advertise the property, where you advertise the property, who you're trying to whose eyes you're trying to have on the property, all of that could result in a fair housing violation. And if you're an owner, you don't know any better. But if you have a property manager who's like, I know how to properly advertise this so it's out to the masses and not
exactly.
limited.
Just for example,
Yeah,
just getting a phone call
right.
and let's say scenario, somebody calls you and says, "I'm in a wheelchair. I'd like to see the property," and you say, "Oh no, we have 3 steps up. It, your wheelchair cannot go up. It's not good for you."
Hmm.
Fair housing violation right away.
Yep. Hmm.
It makes common sense,
Right.
but it's a violation. So
Right.
you're in trouble.
Yep. Exactly right.
But little things like that, paperwork, not knowing the rules, get penalized, not acting on non-paying tenants quickly enough, trusting their sub stories, and overall, they lose more money rather than paying property manager. And of course, forget about all that. The main thing is, as a buy and hold investor, you make money when you're buying properties. The more time you're free, the more time you have to look for properties. So just buying one extra property per year is going to make up the couple $1,000 that you have to pay a property manager to manage your property. But buy another property, make another 20, 50,000. It's way better than doing it yourself.
Walk us through the end of the lease and the tenant's moving out. You've got the security deposit and you've got a walkthrough. Do you involve the landlord at all in terms of the walkthrough, or is it
Absolutely not.
okay? What does that look like?
Tenant gives a notice, then they're moving out. So we go and inspect the property to get ready. On a specific date, the tenant has the right to be at the walkthrough if they want to. Before I have to reverse a little bit. When we're renting the property, we do pictures and video of the property. So when they're moving out, we also have the pictures and the video from when they moved in. So after that is just whatever needs to be repaired. We have to be honest and repair exactly what needs to be done without overcharging. And if there's any money left over from the security deposit, we give it back to the tenant with written explanation what happened and why it happened, with pictures and proof of funds. Otherwise, if we don't do that, tenant can complain 3 times the security deposit, fines, and things like that. And it's just as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, quicker, more efficient. Decides what needs to be repaired, what not. Get a tenant in, and just move on. So we're trying to go and do little things like avoid, for example, we're going to restrict when the leases are ending. Soon we're implementing a policy in the company. So summer months are slow. We're still researching which seasons is slower. Right now, we're absolutely sure that we're not going to have anybody moving November, December. If your lease is ending on November or in December, you automatically will push it to January. We don't want you to move out during Christmas time, and we have hard time finding a new tenant for our landlord. So we're going to push out. So little things like that we can make it better for the landlord and reduce the vacancy.
Well, Augie, thanks so much for being with us. We really do appreciate it. So tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can connect with you, social media, or however.
Social media, you can find me online. Either Google my name the way it is, find me on Facebook. Our property management company, the website is arizonaprox.com online, or you can directly reach out to me. My direct number is 602-405-8156. Like I said, 602-405-8156 or arizonaprox.com. We can find a little more about the services we offer online. So,
and for our real estate investors out there watching, give us an idea when the Arizona Buy and Hold is held every month.
The last Tuesday of the month, between 4 to 7. And actually, this next one, we're going to be talking about creative financing. Sean's going to be talking with Eileen Brown from American Title. We're going to go deep into the problems with creative financing.
It's a hot topic, a topic everybody's interested in nationwide. So a great opportunity to come and meet you, Augie, meet us. We'll all be there and learn more about creative finance. Well, thanks again for being with us, Augie. It was awesome. We appreciate it.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah.
I think we have some questions actually online.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And these are actually both for you, Augie. So we had Marisol reach out from Facebook. So thank you for your questions. The first question, I feel like there's two parts for it. The first part, I think you answered very thoroughly in today's discussion, which was about property repairs. So the second part of the question I'd like to ask, which is how involved does your property management company get involved with evictions?
We try to avoid eviction if we can negotiate something to get it done quicker for the tenant, and it's cheaper for the landlord. We do that. Otherwise, we hire an attorneys. Very, very basic. We just know the process. We know it's ongoing issues. The laws are changing all the time, and our attorneys are on top of everything. So if there's anything changed in the last month or so, they know about it. So efficient, and we paying for it. So we want to get it done quicker. Most of the times, the tenant is already out prior going to court. We rarely. Um, I don't know if we never had to get rid of from anyone to get the sheriff kick him out. Most of the times they leave, but if you're honest, try to treat everybody fairly, respond to the tenants, try to work out with them. Generally, people are nice, so rarely you get these crazy situations that everybody's talking about. So, but just being a nice person and trying to work out with people, things happen. You avoid these evictions. You know, um, but hey, things happen. So it's at least you just have to look at it as a transaction and get it done quicker. Not forget the sub stories. Okay, I know you guys have them, and when I'm talking about the sub stories, I right now it pops up in your head a few times that you've been burned by that. So.
Okay. And following that question, next one for you and last one. What states does ProX Realty cover?
We do Arizona and specifically Maricopa County, a little outside of Maricopa County, going down south, East Valley and Florence, a little bit, but we are very, very efficient in Maricopa County. Um, Property managers out of state, of course, there's a lot of them. You just have to be careful again. And you have the person, specifically in Arizona, you have to be licensed broker to manage properties. Certain states, you don't have to be a real estate broker. It could be just maybe licensed for property manager. I'm not sure. There's different rules. But specifically Arizona, property manager, licensed broker, brokerage that knows what they're doing. So Maricopa County, that's what we can do for you guys.
All right. Thank you, Augie. With that, that is our show for today. Make sure to join us next week. We're going to be talking about the top mistakes real estate investors make in their contracts with guest Ohio attorney Paul Vincent. It'll be a good one. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.